He's 5'2" and he's 6'4". He fights with missiles and with spears. He's all of 31 and he's only 17. He's been a soldier for 1,000 years. He's a Catholic.
What is it, Charlie? Absolutely. What is it, Charlie? Absolutely. What is it, Charlie?
We're ready for another edition of Just Say No. Glad to be back with you.
Getting them up to 3,500 airstrikes this week. They've just said dozens and dozens. So they're starting to fudge their numbers. They're also fudging their wounded numbers, which we've seen throughout the war at times. But those are happening again, downplaying their casualties at this point, because the war is not popular in Israel, and calling up these reserves to send them into Gaza to die, to continue the genocide, is something that they want to keep information under wraps on that. So that is an operation in Khan Yunis. You can see his homemade blacksmith. They're literally blacksmithing their own shovels. So I just wanted to point that one out. The next one is a mortar operation, and there was a significant number of these mortar operations. We could show a whole bunch of these, but the mortar teams are constantly at work, and this is a Saraya al-Quds operation, Islamic Jihad, but the Joint Operations Room participated in these operations all week. So we saw Saraya, we saw the Qassam brigades, but we also saw the PFLP Abu Ali Mustafa brigades carrying out artillery operations. We saw the Al-Amudi brigades from the Al-Aqsa Martyrs brigades carrying out operations. The DFLP National Resistance Brigades carried out operations, and we've seen that all throughout the war. The joint operations function as essentially an auxiliary force, and they are in charge of standoff fire, artillery, mortars, rocket artillery, and they have been part of that in Khan Yunis significantly this week. There was a number of mortar operations that measured in the dozens this week in Khan Yunis, because the Israeli military is not inside Khan Yunis yet. They're being targeted on the outskirts, and the Israeli military is moving slowly, and Netanyahu even admitted that this week. They're moving slower than at any point during the war because they're casualty averse right now. And so they are carrying out massacres, but their soldiers aren't too interested in face-to-face fighting with the resistance, who are waiting in their positions for the battle. So we will see coming up, I think, in the weeks ahead, we will see a number of resistance operations videos. Just this week alone, there was 20 operations in Khan Yunis, a number of Yasin strikes versus tanks, Yasin strikes versus troops, IEDs versus excavators and tanks, all of the things that we have come to know from the resistance. So that is in the south. This battle is in the south. We'll move now to the north. We'll take a look at map number 12. Yeah, same thing, overlapping no-go zones that don't match that IDF map about area that they control. This is not area they control. This is area that they are ethnically cleansing on the edge of, and they use that word. They use the word cleanse, and Rafah is the model of cleansing. So we know what that looks like. In the north, these operations have been focused northwest in Beit Lahia, and also in the Jabalia camp. For the fourth invasion of the Jabalia camp is just beginning. They're just inching in, and they have not touched Beit Hanun, who gave them a serious bloody nose at the end of just before the ceasefire, when the general's plan, as it was called, to cleanse all of North Gaza failed, because the resistance didn't even let the Israelis carry out that operation in Beit Hanun, which is a farming village, let alone all throughout Jabalia camp, and Gaza City, where the most fighters, the most battalions are. So this is the map. We're going to look at Shujaiya operations here. Number 13 is the evac notice. Again, so they clear all this area. They call it a no-go zone. They push everyone into these smaller and smaller areas, and then the resistance moves into the red areas, and that is where the battle takes place. So the warning here that you're looking at is for the east. It is for Jabalia and Gaza City neighborhoods of Shujaiya, Tufar and Duraj, and Zaytun, which are east of Gaza City. Again, we haven't seen troops pushing into those areas yet. They're moving very slowly. But we saw a sniper operation in Shujaiya, number 14. Again, the snipers access via tunnel, both access and egress for this Al Ghul sniper operation. That is also part of the Stones of David series of ambushes. We have to edit this. We have edited out the soldiers here, and of course we're going to edit out the soldiers dropping, which they do. And the Israelis admitted a seriously wounded soldier in this operation, in this David Stones operation. We can see after this also that the excavator that was in the way saw what happened here and hightails it out of the area, which is something we see the soldiers doing. But it's interesting to see the because the Al Ghul is an anti-materiel rifle. It would make an absolute mess of that excavator. So it's probably the right idea by the military, but fleeing these sniper operations are something that we've watched all throughout this war. So another operation in Shujaiya next is number 15. There was 2 television IEDs set up against this this force working. Again, we see CCTV camera footage all over these areas. The Israeli military is very quick to say that there's cameras everywhere and tunnels everywhere, which they are doing. The television IED is one of the 3 core explosive devices that Qassam builds. We know the Shawad, the EFP, is used against tanks. You can see soldiers that we have blurred out again in there to meet YouTube guidelines. And Qassam also makes the Radia, which is an area explosive. And of course, hand grenades. That was the first thing that the Qassam brigades built, was their own hand grenades. So they're accessing this via tunnel, and then they're watching from a third place on the screens, which keeps their you can see the soldiers blurred out there to meet YouTube guidelines. And the next slide is a real detailed operation that we're going to take a little bit to. So these are M15 American anti-tank mines that have been given to the Israelis in large numbers. We can see an operation here that is going to target an Israeli force that's stationed in this house. And this is beforehand. This is the tunnel. Soraya is showing us the tunnel. They don't often do this, but they're showing us the way that they accessed this building. And you can see the way the tunnels are used. They're buried below the ground. You don't just, they're buried. The tunnels are buried. You have to dig them out. And here they're rigging up with IEDs this house, where you can see somebody has just fled this house. And the Israeli military is using this place as a base. And so the resistance targets it, again, predicting which houses along the route. Here's, again, section that's been edited out with the soldiers, and I blurred these soldiers. But this is the detonation of that operation. And again, it's from below ground where the fighters are safe, detonating the building. This is in Shujaiya again. Soraya said that they had confirmed casualties and that they had watched the medevac on this operation in Shujaiya. This operation took place last week. Every video that I'm showing you this week is the same as ever. All the videos were published in the week since you last saw me. And so this operation falls within that. You can see the setup around the building. You can see the tank and the D9 bulldozer around, probably around back, like we saw in the previous video. There's more armored vehicles that just aren't in this camera shot. And I'm going to break down each of these segments for you because the detail in this is remarkable. If we look at number 17, so you can see the way the tunnel is built in this operation. They give us the shot of it. The tunnel is key to this because they're accessing the area in an ethnically cleansed zone. If they're out on the street, they are targeted instantly and killed, which is how you know that these videos that the Israelis are publishing of drone strikes on civilians walking in the middle of the road are civilian massacres. They say they're fighters, but they're not fighters. We've never seen fighters walking down the middle of the road. And here you see it in stark reality under this tunnel. The next slide, you can see the use of the this is a return to sender operation. They're using these M15 mines that the Americans gave to the Israelis and the Israelis used to blow up the houses. They were captured by Saraya and used in this operation. And the next part of it that we clipped here is they're hiding the IED inside the pot, because at this point in the war, the Israelis are very aware of the ways the houses are booby-trapped. They send cameras in, as we've seen. They send dogs in. So these are the disguising of this operation in a pot. The next one is the way it's used in the wall, tucking it into the wall here of someone's house. In behind, they showed in the video how it was on both sides of the wall. They'll cover that up. And the real interesting note is this next one here, where the wiring, he's even put the wiring to match the house's wiring, so as to not be seen by the Israelis or the dogs or the cameras on the dogs and cameras on the drones in this operation. So significant ambush in Shujaiya. There was a number of other operations in Shujaiya this week. On Tuesday, the Israeli military reported an incident where a fighter emerged from a tunnel into an alley in Shujaiya. The alleys of Shujaiya have vexed the Israelis for generations. The fighter shot two soldiers basically from point blank range and escaped back down through the alley, back down into the tunnel, and he survived, returned to his base safely. The incident, according to the IDF, occurred in an area where the IDF had been operating for a relatively long time. Therefore, they believed that there was nobody in this area, but the tunnels allowed them to access, the Qassam fighters to access the area that the Israelis believe they're safe in and hit them. At the time of this operation, the Israelis said there was an Air Force combat helicopter. So this unit has Apache helicopter support and still couldn't find the resistance fighter who killed at least one soldier they're admitting to, and wounded two others. There was also an operation that the Israeli military reported on that we haven't got a field report yet from Qassam, but we will certainly in the coming days, that the Army radio is reporting that Qassam used a drone-dropped explosive on a special forces unit that comprised of two Yahalom tunnel unit soldiers. These are the special forces that go down into the tunnels, and one Shin Bet officer were wounded in that. And also there was an operation in the Jabalia camp that carried out a multi-hour battle that was based around IEDs detonated along the road that the Israelis take. And three Gavati Brigade soldiers were killed in that operation, and two were seriously wounded. According to the Army investigation according to the IDF investigation cited in Army radio, this particular scene along this road had an estimated 20 explosive devices spread out along the route, and the IDF estimates that these were activated from a tunnel, and they made a big deal of it this week in their communications, talking about how these houses all have tunnels. and that is the major threat to their forces and why they are moving slowly. So that is the northern Gaza Strip report. I just wanted to quickly bring people up to date with Yemen because over the past 2 weeks, there has been 19 ballistic missile attacks on Israel and 6 drone attacks with the Yafa drone. In the past 2 weeks, according to the Yemeni Armed Forces and Abdul Malik al-Houthi. And one of the statements from the missile attack by the Yemeni Armed Forces said the Yemeni Armed Forces are following the developments of the battle in Gaza and stand in reverence and respect for the sacrifices of its free and steadfast sons. They extend the military salute to the Al-Qassam brigades and Suraya al-Quds and to all the heroic mujahideen in all the factions who defend the nation when everyone else has abandoned them. May the eyes of the cowards never sleep. Free, dear, independent Yemen is with you, and we will not let you down, even when the whole world does. It is with you. Yemen is with you until the aggression against you stops and the siege is lifted. And another ballistic missile attack 2 days ago, the Yemeni Armed Forces pointed out that the missile strike prevented American military cargo planes from landing. They're landing at Navatim Air Base in the south and also presumably landing some parts at Ben Gurion Airport, but we can see in this next slide the C-17 heavy lift that was on its way to Gaza just turned tail, I guess you call that, when you do a complete 180 and head back where you came from. Instead of dropping off military parts and components and weapons to Israel, it flew back to its base. I think in this case, the base was in Italy, Ramstein in Germany. And there was multiple of these, and I reported last week, and Nora reported as well, on the 800 airlifts of heavy airlift planes bringing weapons to Israel. 90,000 tons, the Ministry of Defense bragged about. So that's one of these planes. So the air blockade is working in the sense that these planes are not landing. And you can see in this next slide from Menk Osing, who put this one together, and you can see them all scrambling here in circles, not wanting to land at the air base that they're supposed to be landing in the south of Israel to unload these weapons. So a successful blockade by the Yemeni Armed Forces is part of their aerial blockade of Israel. And just as a last point, number 33, this is the Qassam brigades saluting the Yemenis for this. You can see the Jambia Yemeni dagger in through the tarmac of Ben Gurion Airport. You can see caution tape on this Qassam poster that says closed by order of Yemen, meaning the airport. You can see the control tower in the background. And this is from an Abu Obaida, the spokesperson for the Qassam brigades. He sent this message out in May. Glory to Yemen, the twin brother of Palestine. May God guide your aim, bless your struggle, and accept your sacrifices, Abu Obaida said. He said, you are from us and we are from you. So solidarity between Yemen and the resistance in Gaza that we have been tracking on the Resistance Report for many months now. And that is the Resistance Report for day 608 of this war.
Thank you so much, John. I don't know. Sometimes I'm just like, I don't even know what to say. The fact that they are using the actual term cleansing or clearing, or these kind of admitting the quiet part out loud in full view. They're saying that they're
term
genociding.
that goes back, isn't it?
Yes.
Long time, like to the Nakba.
Yeah.
I remember Ilan Pape writing about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not an accidental term, and it's what they did. And in Rafah is completely destroyed. And so it is cleansed in that sense. Their other attempts to do that elsewhere have failed. And so we'll see how the resistance responds to the attempts to cleanse in the north. in particular. But in Rafah and the battle in Khan Yunis right now that is just beginning, I think will be all eyes on that battle.
Yeah. Incredible. And just the way, I mean, I think that after 600 days of this genocide and, the indigenous locally built rockets and other devices, it doesn't seem like there's a lack of supply. I mean, you're always talking about the kind of recycled or upcycled, return to sender kinds of munitions that the Palestinian resistance is still continuing to build.
And in a case like Khan Yunis, the Israelis have not been operated in Khan Yunis in more than a year. We know, and we hear them on your excellent news reports all the time about firing missiles into the hospitals in Khan Yunis, but actually fighting on the ground against the resistance and not just massacring people in hospital beds. That hasn't happened for over a year. So the entire Khan Yunis brigade has presumably been preparing for this battle for the last year. And I think that's why the Israelis move very, very slowly right now and are not actually trying to fight, because what they admitted is that they don't care about killing fighters anymore. The Qassam brigades are the same size, and they acknowledge that. American intelligence acknowledges that. What they want is territory, and they want to destroy and cleanse that territory that they can hold around the buffer zones to increase pressure. It's part of the aid plan to increase pressure, and it's been a tough couple of weeks to be watching what has been a horrific 600 days. But the aid that Craig McIver and that you covered in the introduction is devastating. Appalling criminal behavior that history hopefully will be a strong judge of.
Yep, exactly. And we just have to keep pushing, as Craig was saying, and we can't let up. We have a couple of things that we wanted to discuss. There was now these like very casual and convenient admissions by former Biden administration officials. We have Matt Miller, people call him Count Smirkula, the former State Department spokesperson this week, admitting that Israel has committed war crimes, something he was put there on the podium to deny over and over and over again for the first year and a half of this genocide. There's actually a clip of the Gray Zone's Liam Cosgrove confronting Miller at the State Department last October, 1 year into the genocide. So this was October 2024. Let's go to that clip. And then, Ali, I want you to analyze this for us.
Question for you is, we often hear in response to these concerns that, well, Putin, Khomeini, they're war criminals, they're terrorists, as if they're too inherently evil or immoral for us to negotiate with. But meanwhile, this administration has financed a genocide in Gaza for the last year, and every day you're up there denying accountability for it. So, I mean, what gives you the right to lecture other countries on their moral...
So, if you have a policy question for me, I'm happy to take it. If you want to give a speech, there are plenty of places in Washington where you can give a speech.
Yeah, but people are sick of the bullshit in here. I mean, it is a genocide. You are abetting it, and you are risking nuclear war in Ukraine.
So, Ali, what do you make of Matt Miller suddenly, revealing that, yes, Israel is committing war crimes when he's conveniently out of office?
Well, Nora, that clip, of course, is a throwback to the Biden administration, and I think we all got thoroughly sick of watching Matt Miller lie, deny genocide, deny war crimes, deny what everyone, including many of the journalists in that room, were seeing with their own eyes. And Miller now is out of office, and he gave an interview to Sky News on June 2nd, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen short clips of this, but I actually watched the whole thing and pulled out a few clips that I thought it's worth watching and then commenting on. So why don't we run the first clip, Tamara, and then we'll just go through them.
With Gaza, so it's such a Gaza has been such a horrific situation for so long.
I'm interested to hear you say that because, I was in so many of your briefings, and I hope you don't mind me saying this. We got the sense from you, your persona, what you were having to say as spokesman, that you didn't really care as much as some people did about what was going on. I kind of wondered at times whether you were seeing the same images that we were seeing daily. Were you?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing the same images. In some cases, we're seeing other images that you probably didn't see. I can tell you, just speaking for myself, but it's true about my colleagues in the government. The effect of that war was crushing. To look at what was happening to children every day in that war.
So it's just, I mean, that's an admission that they knew all along, all their lies, their gaslighting, their deflection, their blaming the victims. They knew all along. He just said it there. So just hold that thought and let's go to the next clip, and then we'll have more to say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it will be a secret to know that the administration did debate at times whether and when to cut off weapons to Israel. You saw us in the spring of 2024 stop the shipment of 2,000-pound bombs to Israel because we did not believe they would use those in a way that was appropriate in Gaza. And it was clear to us in that period that there was a time when our publicly discussing withholding weapons from Israel, as well as the protests on college campuses in the United States, as well as the movement of some European countries to recognize the state of Palestine, all of which appropriate discussions, appropriate decisions, protests are appropriate, but all of those things together were leading the leadership of Hamas to conclude that they didn't need to agree to a ceasefire. They just needed to hold out for a little bit longer, and they could get what they always wanted, which was Israel that was forced to stand down and Israel that was isolated, and maybe a widening of the war where Hezbollah would come in and Iran would come in. So,
wow, that's an interesting take.
Yeah, another admission there that because there were protests against the genocide, we had to keep going with the genocide because we can't reward protests against genocide by stopping genocide.
Right.
And he's continuing this lie that it was Hamas that was refusing a ceasefire. The same lie that Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy, is repeating now, and just like complete continuation of this. We spoke about that with Jeremy Scahill last week. So it just goes on and on. And so that's another admission for the record. And then let's go back on this on some hand wringing. Let's look at the next clip where we get some more hand wringing from Matthew Miller.
Now, the thing that I look back on that I will always ask questions of myself about, and I think this is true for others in government, is in that intervening period between the end of May and the middle of January, when thousands of Palestinians were killed, innocent civilians who didn't want this war, had nothing to do with it. Was there more that we could have done to pressure the Israeli government to agree to that ceasefire?
And the answer is,
I think at times there probably was. Now it's difficult. Israel was not the only what's the right word? Not the only party to this negotiation. You saw Hamas repeatedly move the goalposts, but you saw Netanyahu move the goalposts as well. And I do think there are times that we should have been tougher on him.
Yeah. So we were saying all along, and it's not, you don't have to be a genius to say it, that they could have stopped it. And now he's saying we could have done more, but of course they could have stopped it. And there's, I don't know whether to call it conscience, but there's something there that is awakened in him that he can't live with, that all those thousands of people who were killed, were killed because he and the administration he served refused to do what they could do to stop it. They had the power to stop it and chose not to. That's what he just told us right there, to translate it into plain English. And now let's look at the final clip I've picked, and then I've got a couple of comments I want to make about Matthew Miller's ultimate responsibility here.
Going on in Gaza now is a genocide?
I don't think it's a genocide, but I think I think it is without a doubt true that Israel has committed war crimes.
You wouldn't have said that at the podium.
Yeah, look, because when you're at the podium, you're not expressing your personal opinion. You're expressing the conclusions of the United States government. The United States government had not concluded that they've committed war crimes. Still have not concluded that.
But your personal view is they have.
And
they were while you were there.
But let me qualify that. There are two ways to think about the commission of war crimes. One is if the state has pursued a policy to deliberately committing war crimes or is acting reckless in a way that aids and abets war crimes. And that, I think, is an open question. I think what is almost certainly not an open question is that there have been individual incidents that have been war crimes where members of the Israeli military have committed war crimes. So ultimately, in almost every major conflict, including conflicts prosecuted by democracies, you will see individual members of the militaries commit war crimes. And the way you judge a democracy is whether they hold those people accountable.
But Israel hasn't.
That's my point,
right.
Is we have not yet seen them hold sufficient numbers of the military accountable, and I think it's an open question whether they're going to.
I'm really struck that you think now that Israel did commit war crimes, and yet at the time, and I get why, but at the time you were at the podium and you couldn't say that. I mean, personally, that must be very difficult for you.
So the State Department itself had concluded, not in these, they didn't phrase it in these terms, but I think I did at the podium a few times, had concluded that it was likely that Israel had committed war crimes. But I do think it's almost certain that they have.
How difficult was it?
So, like, when there are modern day Nuremberg type trials one day for the genocide, the Holocaust in Gaza, will Matt Miller be culpable, even if he is, kind of sort of admitting that he personally feels like Israel was indeed committing war crimes? Or what's his responsibility here, Ali?
Well, before I get to that, I think that's a critical question, Nora. I just want to point out that he's still spinning here. He's still trying to minimize. He's saying, Israel undoubtedly committed war crimes, but he's also saying, but it might have just been individuals. It wasn't necessarily the policy of the government. But remember, just a few minutes ago, we heard him say that they had delayed the shipment of the 2,000-pound bombs because they didn't think Israel was going to use them appropriately in Gaza. So that's a contradiction, because that statement about the 2,000-pound bombs is an implicit admission that they knew that it was the policy of the Israeli government to commit war crimes by using 2,000-pound bombs to attack civilians. So I just want to point out that contradiction there. But what his excuse reminded me of when he says, well, it wasn't my personal opinion, I was just doing the bidding of the government, I wasn't speaking for myself. Basically, I was just following orders. Right. And this is called the Nuremberg defense, which runs back to the post-World War II trials of Nazi war criminals. And the Nuremberg principles, which came out of those trials, are the basis of much of international law today. The Nuremberg principles are foundational to the Rome Statute, the founding charter of the International Criminal Court, which, of course, as we spoke about with Craig Muhaiba, has issued those arrest warrants for Israeli leaders, including Benjamin Netanyahu. And one of perhaps the best known of the Nuremberg principles is Nuremberg Principle 4, which we can actually show. Tamara, I hadn't highlighted it, but if it's possible to show it, we should. In any case, I'll read it out. This is quote, the fact that a person acted pursuant to the order of his government or of a superior does not relieve him from responsibility under international law, provided a moral choice was in fact possible to him. So the Nuremberg principle is very clear that saying I was just following orders, when you had a choice to defy those orders or to resign, means that you remain culpable if by following those orders you aided in the commission of war crimes, which Matthew Miller arguably did. And he would not be alone, because you'll remember that we've spoken in previous programs with Layla Al-Arian, the filmmaker and documentary maker from Al Jazeera, about State Department officials who helped cover up the fact that Israel was blocking humanitarian aid. And there were some officials who resigned, who made the moral choice to resign because they could not go along with these policies that they knew would facilitate and prolong this genocide. Matthew Miller, until the very last day, followed the orders to aid and abet war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And he has to deny it's a genocide, because otherwise he would be implicitly admitting that he took part in a genocide. Right. Unfortunately, at least in this world, at this time, Matthew Miller is not being held accountable. In a just world, he would be at least investigated for as an accessory to war crimes and genocide. But in the world we live in, he is being rewarded, and he's now a partner in the Washington lobbying firm and influence peddling firm Via Novo, where he's going to monetize his experience covering up war crimes and genocide for Israel. And you can see there the page advertising his services at Via Novo, which as part of its pitch to potential clients says, quote, Via Novo is a strategic advisory firm for high-stakes brand, policy, and crisis issues. For 2 decades, we have helped some of the world's most recognized names shape public opinion and media conversation, win legislative fights and invest about battles, manage crises and litigation, and expand across markets and borders. So just how disgusting, immoral, and depraved is that he goes from lying to perpetuate genocide to selling his services as a so-called spokesperson to whatever unsavory corporations or governments may come to Via Novo as clients.
I mean, that's a very regular pattern that we see with former State Department, officials, government spokespeople. They go on to become, anchors at MSNBC or private sector consultants or think tank members, continuing to do in private what they did in public, just making a lot more money doing so. Always failing, lying upwards. And he's not the only colleague of, he's not the only one in the former Biden administration that is acquiring large sums of money to continue to toe the pro-genocide line. Matthew Miller's colleague, Vedant Patel, has been hired by pro-Israel lobbying firm SKDK, as reported by the website Sludge. Do you want to talk a little bit about Vedant? Remind us of his work.
Well, you can see the image of him there on the screen. I'm going to spare us one of his a clip of any of his press conferences where he just, lied outright, constantly denying Israeli crimes or justifying them or blaming the victims, the same sorts of things that Matthew Miller did for all those 15, 16 months of the Biden administration's active role in this genocide. But according to Sludge, this website. Vedant Patel, who spent much of the Biden administration defending Israel's military actions in Gaza as State Department spokesperson, has landed a new job, senior vice president at SKDK, a Democratic consulting firm that is also a registered foreign agent for Israel. During his time at the State Department, Patel effectively served as a public defender of Israeli policy as the administration stood firmly behind Israel despite mounting casualties and global condemnation. Now at SKDK, he joins a company explicitly hired to do the same, conducting press outreach and protecting Israel's image, only this time on Israel's payroll. And we can actually see that. I looked up SKDK's most recent FARA filing. This is the Foreign Agents Registration Act filing that the firm has to make with the U.S. government. And if you scroll down, Tamara, just to line 4 there, you can see that the name to line 4, you can see the name of the principal client of SKDK is the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And Tamara, if you then scroll down to the last 2 pages of this document, you'll see that it lists the very last 2 pages all the way down. There we go. Yeah, you can just stop there. You can see this is a list of all the media organizations that this Israeli government lobbying firm has reached out to on behalf of the Israeli government. And you can see what this firm does. It reaches out to all the mainstream media we know on behalf of the Israeli government, likely putting pressure on them, spinning stories, putting forward lies. And there you see ABC, BBC, NBC, NPR, MSNBC, Wall Street Journal, you name it, they're on that list. And so Vedant Patel was just until a few months ago working officially for the United States government, and now he went immediately to working officially for the Israeli government. I mean,
incredible.
It's all this corruption, this influence peddling is all done in the open. And this is what you have to think about when they're up on these gigs with these corrupt influence peddling firms pay far more than a government salary. So actually, when they are up on that podium lying to cover up genocide, they're actually auditioning for these jobs. When they're on the podium, that's their job interview for these lobbying firms. And what that is that they're getting paid now is blood money. Their salary is paid for with the blood of all those thousands of Palestinians that even Matthew Miller admitted could have been saved, could be alive today if the Biden administration had done what it could do, if the Trump administration does what it could do right now and stop this genocide.
All those media, that only covered 3 days. When you were scrolling down on that document, it would only covered 3 days. That's how much lobbying they were doing.
Right, and they have to file those FARA reports regularly. So if you were to look through all the FARA reports, you'd see all their activities, all their meetings on behalf of the Israeli government. So, whatever the period was for that report, that's what it covers.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Just astonishing, even though it shouldn't be, because this is how the system operates. This is how it's engineered. This is how these people get to where they are, lying and shilling for colonialism and genocide and empire, of course. Let's turn to a brief discussion. There have been new reports of Israel supporting Palestinian collaborator groups in Gaza. I mean, this is not a new thing. There have been these kind of collaborationist armed gangs. We've seen our contributors on the ground in Gaza talk about these armed gangs that are disrupting aid deliveries, that are looting humanitarian aid trucks, that are working with the Israelis. But what's different? What's new about these reports, and why is it significant that they're coming out right now? That Israel is actually admitting to some sort of collaboration.
Well, earlier today, the former Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman made a headline-grabbing claim in the Israeli media, and he said that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is arming groups that he described as ISIS-linked criminal gangs in Gaza in order to fight Hamas. Lieberman, of course, has been in coalition governments with Netanyahu in the past, but he's now his political rival and in opposition. And if we could look at the first story, this article from Ynet, the English version of Ynet, came out just before we went on air, and it explains the story. A couple of quotes from it. The operation, led by the Shin Bet Internal Security Service, is described as planned and managed with the goal of reducing Israeli military casualties while systematically undermining Hamas through targeted strikes, infrastructure destruction, and the promotion of rival local forces. An unnamed senior official told Ynet, quote, "It's a calculated effort. While it'll take time to judge its success, it clearly disrupts Hamas's ability to maintain the deterrence and security it once enjoyed. Eventually, it could open the door to new governing alternatives." End of quote. And so, yeah, I mean, this is something that's been talked about for quite a long time now, for many months. And this is, it's kind of a confirmation, or at least it aligns with that. It's it's the actual, and it's a former Israeli minister talking about it. And according to Ynet, he actually did that against military censorship. As we know, all Israeli press is censored by the military. And according to this Ynet article, quote, "The initiative, in other words, the arming of these gangs in Gaza, was publicly exposed on Thursday when former Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman violated military censorship in disclosing that Israel had armed a Gaza clan fighting Hamas. The censorship office then cleared part of the information for publication, but security officials said the damage had already been done. The Prime Minister's office did not deny the report, stating only that Israel is working to defeat Hamas through various means, following the recommendations of all security chiefs." And it notes, during his term as defense minister, Lieberman had backed similar efforts in Syria, arming rebel factions aligned with Israeli interests. Interestingly, if we can go to the next article, the English version of this article plays down the sort of ISIS aspect of the story. And you can see here, this is an auto-translate of the Hebrew version, which is headlined, according to Lieberman, Netanyahu formed 5 ISIS-identified militias in Gaza. Prime Minister's obviously not deny. Obviously, it's a machine translation, so it's a little bit janky there. Yes, so so, allegedly, according to Lieberman, this militia in question, led by a man called Yasser Abu Shabab, is allegedly affiliated with ISIS. And aspect is mentioned only in passing in the English version. And today's reports in the Israeli press align with what Palestinians have been saying for a long time now. The Palestinian analyst and writer Mohammed Shahada, who's with the European Council of Foreign Relations, posted a thread to X back in November last year. And in it, he accused Israel of, quote, aiding ISIS-linked terrorists and criminals to sow chaos and famine in Gaza, and named the same man who's come out in the press reports today, Yasser Abu Shabab, as being the leader of this militia, which is now reportedly working in collaboration with Israel in Gaza. And also that same month, February 2024, the Washington Post reported that armed criminal gangs in Gaza had been looting UN aid trucks. I think we have that headline as well. If you've got that tomorrow, yeah, thank you. And they've been doing. You can see the headline there: gangs looting. This from November last year. Gangs looting Gaza aid operate in areas under Israeli control. Aid groups say. So yeah, these gangs had been looting UN aid trucks, and our friend Abu Bakr Abed, has also reported on this for us. And they've done this under the protection of Israeli forces, as viewers can see from this article. Next tweet. More recently, last month, Mohammed Shahada also posted this photo of Yasser Abu Shabab, the leader of this militia, reporting that his militia had set up checkpoints in Rafah under Israeli protection and had been fitted out with brand new military equipment. You can see in these photos and others that are circulating online at the moment. And notably, this equipment looks very similar to other equipment issued to the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. And finally, the final tweet. We've got a video, but Yasser Abu Shabab also came out in the open this week, and he posted a video online. It was posted with him actually appearing in the video, claiming, and in it he claims to act as a legitimate authority. And he called on residents of Rafah to return to Rafah, saying that there are camps being set up under Israeli military surveillance and promising them aid. So, in effect, aided by Israel, this militia seems to be looting UN aid, stopping it from getting to Palestinians, and then actually using it as a lure to trap Palestinians in concentration camps, effectively, under the ultimate control of Israel. And as Nora detailed in her news report at the start of this week's live stream, the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a US and Israeli-backed organization, began operations last month in Rafah. Desperate people seeking food aid from them came under Israeli fire, and they've killed more than 100, as Nora detailed. Now, with the Israel-backed Yasser Abu Shabab militia setting up new camps in Rafah, it all looks to be part of a trap to concentrate Palestinians in one area, making it easier for them to be killed by Israel. So, regardless of whether or not these groups are ISIS affiliated, it seems pretty sure that they're actually Israel affiliated. I think that's the most salient point. And much like the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, Israel has for decades been on a search for reliable native agents, and this is, of course, a common strategy, a strategy as old as colonialism itself.
I mean, I'm always very curious about the timing of this. I mean, Avigdor Lieberman, he is a genocidal fascist. I mean, he was the one who, when he was an MP, he came up with the idea of rounding up all the Palestinian citizens of Israel, and drowning them in the sea. Why would he be the one at this time?
Yeah, it's a good question.
To try and leak this information that actually isn't new. I mean,
his criticism is that the guns will be turned on Israel eventually, which seems unlikely to me. But he's trying to political point score against his rival Netanyahu.
Yeah, I think that's the key point here. I mean, there is new information in the sense that this is now confirmed, really, basically from Israeli sources. The fact that it was under Israeli military censorship and that he violated censorship and they cleared it for publication is confirmation that this is true, that Israel is backing these groups, and Netanyahu couldn't deny it. So, what was assumed in the past, what was likely in the past is now confirmed to
Yeah.
the extent that these groups are working directly with Israel. So I think that's what we can say is new. But I think Ace is right, because we also had Yair Lapid, another Israeli opposition politician, nominally opposition politician, coming out making the same point, that they say their argument is Netanyahu basically allowed Hamas to flourish, and then Hamas attacked us. And now, without any strategic discussion, without any real, sense of what might happen, he's doing the same with other groups. He's arming other groups who will then use their guns against us. And this all points to the sense that Netanyahu is more politically vulnerable than he has been in a while, and they want to bring down the government.
Yeah.
And so that, I think that's what's going on here. But often, I think here there's 2 points to make here that I think are important. One is, often we get information, real information that reveals hidden truths from Israelis attacking each other. That's a pattern we've seen in the past. A lot of the October 7th revelations come because of Israelis attacking and sniping at each other, and again, thinking it's all in their secret language and no one else is going to hear it. And the other thing is, again, to underline that point that Asa made, that this has been a long-standing Israeli strategy in Palestine and in other countries that Israel occupies. So in Palestine, there has always been a search for Palestinian collaborators. The village leagues in the 1970s to set up local collaborator bodies in the West Bank, then basically turning the PLO into Israel's subcontractor in the Oslo Accords, and then developing that further with Abbas, but also in Lebanon with the so-called South Lebanon Army, which was the proxy militia that Israel set up and supported for more than 2 decades, from the late 1970s until the Israeli occupation collapsed, thanks to the resistance in 2000. But then again in Syria, as Asa acknowledged there, with what came out in terms of Israeli support for ISIS and Al-Qaeda linked militias in Syria. So this is a long-standing Israeli strategy.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about what this all means and how it's going to play out. Is there anything else we want to say about, where we are right now in terms of the growing global revulsion at Israel? Ali, you wrote and published a post this week about a new survey. It kind of goes back to our interview with Craig Mochaiber, talking about, Israel becoming, because of public pressure and because of this, global revulsion at this genocide, being more and more isolated. And so it means that we have to keep, putting more and more pressure on the levers of power to further isolate, to sanction Israel, to stop these weapons from being manufactured and delivered and then dropped on the homes of Palestinian children. Talk about this survey, what some of the key points are.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight this. I guess it's a good news story in a way, and we all need that. But the Pew Research Center, which is this very mainstream US-based research center, did a survey in 24 countries around the world, including in Latin America, Europe, Asia. And the only country in the immediate vicinity of Palestine that they included is Turkey. And I suppose doing any more surveys in the region would have been redundant, because you would have gotten unanimity. But what it found is that Israel's more unpopular and viewed more negatively than ever. And these shifts are significant in some areas. They say, for example, in 20 of the 24 countries surveyed, around half of adults or more have an unfavorable view of Israel. Around 3/4 or more hold this view in Australia, Greece, Indonesia, Japan, the Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, and Turkey. And it was really remarkable. I mean, some things stood out. For example, among the European countries they surveyed, Israel is viewed most negatively in the Netherlands, with 78% of the public viewing it negatively, which is really remarkable because the Netherlands, in terms of its government, has always been one of the most pro-Israel countries. And the numbers across Europe are very high. Spain, 75%, Sweden, 75%, Germany, 64%, which is really remarkable, again, given the unanimity in support of Israel among the German political class. But again, that explains why there's so much violent repression in Germany. If the population were on board with the pro-Israel, pro-genocide policy, you wouldn't need to send the police out to beat people up all the time and to censor people and to take them to court and so on. Even Hungary, whose government is very staunchly pro-Israel. Remember that Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban a couple of months ago welcomed Netanyahu to Budapest, defying the International Criminal Court arrest warrant for Netanyahu. Even in Hungary, a majority of people view Israel negatively. And in all of these countries except two, Israel's negatives are far, far higher than its positives. So it has net negative ratings virtually across the world. Turkey wins the prize, so to speak, with Israel with 93% of the population viewing Israel negatively and only 4% viewing it favorably. But there were some other notable results. In the US, for example, for the first time ever, at least the first time that I've ever seen in decades of following this issue and in all the polls I've seen, a majority of Americans now view Israel negatively. Over the last decade or so, we've seen a lot of polls showing that subsections of the US population, whether it's people who lean Democrat, younger people, people of color, majorities view Israel negatively or support Palestinian rights. But this is the first time we see a majority of US adults overall viewing Israel negatively. That is really a historic shift. And what's also interesting is that there is a break on the American right. Pew observes that in many of the countries where it conducted the surveys, people who place themselves on the left have a more negative view of Israel than those on the right. But this ideological gap is most pronounced in the US, where 74% of liberals have a negative view of Israel compared with 30% of conservatives. But there's something really interesting here, because Pew did a survey focused on Americans back in April, and there they found a sharp rise in the number of Republican voters who view Israel unfavorably. It rose from 27% to 37% just since 2022, indicating that Israel really is losing support across the political spectrum. And we can see this in terms of public discourse, in that there has been a notable new phenomenon of prominent right-wing commentators such as Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Judge Andrew Napolitano voicing skepticism and sometimes really harsh criticism of Israel and U.S. support for Israel that once seemed unthinkable. So I really do think that there are some fundamental shifts going on here. As we discussed with Craig Mukhaiber, it's frustrating how slow these filter through into action, but they are doing so. And we did see some action this week. Spain canceled a major $310 million arms deal with Israel's Rafael to buy Spike anti-tank missiles, and that's not likely to be the last such action. So things are changing, and I think that we can take heart from that, and that should encourage us.
It really should. Thanks for that, Ali. And before we go, let's take a look at the website. There's so much that we have published this week. We have just several really incredible features by our writers in Gaza. They're excruciatingly beautiful and moving and devastating to read. So please go read those features, including one by Donia Abusita, who we had on the program last week, of course. 3 pieces of Israeli shrapnel. She talks about her family and the injuries that her loved ones have experienced. And then we have just some fantastic news reports, analyses. We have a new podcast from last week where students at USF here in San Francisco and MIT have successfly pressured their administrations to divest from certain Israeli companies. Give that a listen. And then, of course, sign up for our email list up at the top. And yes, Ali?
Yeah, I just want to highlight, if I can, Nora, just
Yeah.
a couple of stories, I think. I mean,
Yes.
you're right. It's all amazing. And I'm so proud of all the journalism and writing that we're able to publish. But just a couple of pieces that really stand out for me. The reportage by Khalid al-Karshali in Gaza, barely any flour, no meat. And he talks about the struggle to survive the famine, especially people trying to prepare for a little, it's some way to mark the Eid al-Adha, which is beginning, which is in the next
tomorrow,
couple of
yeah.
days. Beginning tonight in the region, and that's a very tough piece to read, but I'm very glad that Khalid continues to report from the ground in Gaza. The piece by Dalal Yassin gives some coverage, some analysis of the situation in Lebanon, where Mahmoud Abbas recently visited and is trying to disarm Palestinians there. Just very bizarre moves by Abbas. Some great analysis by Yassin about Abbas's attempts to assert authority and legitimacy there, which seem doomed to fail. So it's a bit of a puzzle why he'd do that. There's also a piece just published by our colleague Michael Brown on the genocidal language by Israeli groups like far-right groups like Im Tirtzu, whose new slogan that they were touting on Israel's so-called Jerusalem Day is "No victory without a Nakba," and what Michael focuses on is the support that these groups and the support that these phenomena are getting from U.S. politicians and from U.S. Political groups. So again, highlighting the complicity there. So there's just a great deal of extraordinary work that I'm very proud that all of our viewers, listeners, and readers enable us to publish with their support. So thank you so much for helping us get this information out. We can't say it enough. We can't do it without you.
That's right. And if you are so moved and are able, hit the donate now link up at the top there. And especially, it really helps, especially with our monthly donations. And thank you to all of our monthly donors for stepping up and continuing to support this publication and our contributors in Gaza. It goes directly to them. Anything you want to say about our monthly contributors, Ali?
Just to thank everyone for all your support. I usually like to have a list of names to thank some people by name, but I don't have those in front of me today. We'll do that next week. But we appreciate each and every person. And also just to say Eid Mubarak, happy Eid to a happy and meaningful Eid to everyone who will be celebrating.
Yes. And I want to give thanks, as always, to Tamara Nassar, our director and producer of this program and all of the live stream and podcast episodes. Thank you, Tamara. Ellie Gerzon for social media, Michael F. Brown for fact-checking, Pierre Loisel for we had our inaugural episode on KPFA in the San Francisco Bay Area. this past week, and we're going to be on every Tuesday at 11 in the morning at KPFA. It's really nice to be back on their airwaves as well. And we are also streaming all over the world, and in Canada. I think there's 5 different radio stations that pick up this broadcast, either the news or our condensed version of this episode. So thank you to everyone who's picking that up. Thank you to everyone at the Electronic Intifada, all of our staff, and thank all of you on behalf of myself, John, Ali, Asa, and Tamara. Thank you, and we will see you next week.
By the pale afternoon, and I walked by your Lord, and
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. Have a great evening. Thank you. Sam Melvin, why do you just say no? Thank you. Have a good afternoon. Have a good evening. Of just say no. Thank you.
What is the truth?